the second session. It's going to be a treat for those who love crime thrillers. Yes. I don't know if crime petrol ke fan hai nahi, but crime thrillers certainly make you feel excited, curious, and intensified as well. This session is titled as Crime Thrillers and Fiction, and in the conversation as authors we're going to have Dr. Pradeep Kapoor ji and Kiran Manral ji. They are going to be in conversation with Dr. S.Q. Naqvi ji and Dr. Neha Jain ji. Yes. Yes, we have simultaneous sessions. वागट पे भी कुछ सेशंस हो रहे हैं. आप चाहें तो बिल्कुल वहाँ पे भी अपनी रजामंदी दे सकते हैं और वहाँ पे भी प्रेजेंट रह सकते हैं. For now, मैं चाहूँगा कि हमारे जो ऑथर्स हैं एंड जो डिस्कशंस हैं वो मंच पे आए. डॉक्टर प्रदीप कपूर जी एंड किरण मंडल जी, मैं चाहूँगा तालियों से उनका स्वागत करें. मंच पर तालियां होनी चाहिए उनके स्वागत के लिए. And they will be in conversation with Dr. S.Q. Naqvi ji and Dr. Neha Jain ji. जी हाँ. मैं सभी हमारे जो ऑडियंस है उनसे रिक्वेस्ट करना चाहूँगा, प्लीज सेटल डाउन, आराम से बैठ जाए. And let me tell you, Dr. Pradeep Kapoor ji is a gold medalist and topper of his MBBS batch. He is a pediatrician by profession and a writer by passion. He has published 10 books with several prestigious publications. His works of fiction includes A Tale of Two Nights, Posla, The Last Ball 6, The Honeymoon, and Hoppy the Hitchhiker. His books on parenting have been translated into 7 languages. Make Your Child a Winner has been a national bestseller. जी हाँ, तालियां होनी चाहिए. His book, The Honeymoon, which is the first of its kind, it's a scuba diving mystery with twists and turns at every step. It can be classified as a scientific mystery as it uses medical forensics in solving the case. The second author for this session is Kiran Manral ji. She is a writer and major social media influencer. After quitting her full-time job when her son was born, Kiran ji became a mommy blogger on the internet. She was a journalist at the Asian Age, the Times of India senior consultant at Vector Insights, Ideas editor, at shethepeople.tv. The Indian Council of UN Relations with the Ministry of Women and Children, Government of India, awarded her the International Women's Day Award 2018 for excellence in the field of writing. Her remarkable crime thrillers include a book titled as Things in Heaven and Earth, where a husband character dies of a heart attack in Goa, and of course his wife is devastated, like of course. Her another book is titled as Missing, Presumed Dead. It talks about how in a dysfunctional marriage it may seem convenient when the wife commits suicide, but things aren't always the same. That's quite interesting. As the discussants, we are happy to invite Mr. S.Q. Naqvi ji. ADG Dr. S.Q. Naqvi ji is a senior IPS officer of 1990 batch and is an expert in cybercrime detection. He has served as the special director in Western Regional Office of Enforcement Directorate at Mumbai. He did MD Medicine from Raipur and later joined the All India Police Service and served an undivided MP on important posts. As the second discussion for the day, we are elated to invite Dr. Neha Jain ji. Dr. Neha Jain is an IAS officer currently posted as a Sub-Divisional Magistrate in Ashokanagar, Madhya Pradesh. She graduated as a dental surgeon from Maulana Azad Medical College, New Delhi, and joined the Indian Administrative Service in 2018. Dr. Neha Jain is also a national medalist in gymnastics and has a diploma in Bharatanatyam. She enjoys reading and playing her ukulele when not reporting to duty. And now, dear ladies and gentlemen, the stage is all yours. I am ready to greet somebody.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you are all, we are able to keep your interest in this interesting topic, crime, thrillers and fiction. I congratulate Dr. Pradeep Kapoor and Kiran Manral for adopting this genre of writing, which I think is still the most loved and most liked, right from early childhood up to later ages also. This passion goes on. I can say it for myself. I have been studying, I have been reading a lot about these crime thrillers and luckily I got the opportunity to serve in the police for now almost 32 years, and I have seen a lot of cases live also. So it is more interesting and more fascinating when I keep on reading somebody else's perspective, because we see everything from the viewpoint of law, four corners of law. But a writer's mind is much beyond our imagination. They are opening very much new facets to our thinking also, and it is always interesting, and I cannot just stop reading midway, stopping midway. I had to finish the book. I had gone through the present section's books also. Of course, the wrong one for Dr. Manral's 2 books, but Dr. Pradeep Kapoor's book I have read full. And I can say that he has been able to keep your suspense and thrill in the book and come out with a really sharp and good writing. I would like to now start the conversation by inviting Dr. Kapoor for a small presentation.
There is generally a lot of confusion, and people keep asking what's the difference between crime, mystery and thriller novels. So what's the difference? We all agree that few genres sell better than mystery, thriller and crime. The best books in these genres are gripping, they are full of intrigue, and the suspense is maintained till the very end. While there is a considerable overlap, I think I should. So, while there is a considerable overlap between crime novels, mystery novels, and thrillers, but they are not synonymous genres. Each has its own characteristics and attracts different specific readership. Next, please. These are covers of some of the Hindi crime books by a very popular Hindi crime writer, Ibn Safi, also known as Asrar Ahmad Shah. Next, please. Coming to crime novels, they typically focus on a criminal who must be caught, and usually by the police. The best crime books, they often have a theme of good versus evil, and there is a strong notion that wrong deeds must be avenged. 3 most popular subgenres of crime are noir, military and true crime. Next. Noir crime novels depict cynicism, fatalism and moral ambiguity. They may project an anti-humanist view of society. A detective often confronts the dark underbelly of human society, and noir usually takes place in cities. Farewell by Lovely by Raymond Chandler. It follows several noir conventions. The protagonist, Philip Marlowe, is both a private investigator and an anti-hero. It's set in a dark city which is run by criminals, and the novel begins with the murder of a bar owner. Marlowe meets Moose, which makes him search for Velma, which leads him to Marriott, then to Anne, and finally to Miss Grail. Eventually he realizes that Grail is Velma. His search ends with that. The storyline is pretty straightforward, but with the plot keeps on growing increasingly complex with each clue. Next. And here in the military, here the metaphors of crime fiction are superimposed on a military setting. Tom Clancy is the long-time top gun of military thriller. It's by Boston Globe. The Hunt for The Hunt for Red October. It's a very popular Tom Clancy novel. Here the Red October is a submarine which has nuclear warheads mounted on it. And the typical scenario is of Cold War. Next. True crime is really popular with people because these crime stories tell tales of crimes that actually happened at some point in time. Because they are real, the readers are able to connect and find them more gripping. Death in Mumbai by Vinay Baghel is a popular novel where alluring aspiring actress Maria Susairaj, her dashing naval officer boyfriend Emily Jerome, they were accused of killing Neeraj Grover, a film producer. His body was hacked into pieces and was set on fire. What actually attracted people was that these young, upwardly mobile characters, what went wrong with their thinking? What made these professionals turn to violent crime? Next, please. Now coming to another thriller novels, these devote most of their time to the focus is on suspense and dread and the fear of a future crime. There is all the element of thrill and fear is predominant in these books. The bad guy is often established early on, and the investigator must work to stop him from doing further evil. The Jack Reacher series written by Lee Child and R.L. Stein's Fear Street series for young adults are examples of high-stakes thriller novels. Next page. The three popular subgenres are horror thrillers. Here the suspense is mixed with terrifying and grotesque situations, including supernatural elements. Legal thrillers, most of us have read John Grisham's books. Most of the action occurs within the court, confined to the courts. Then psychological thrillers are another popular subgenre. A psychological thriller novel finds the terror in madness and paranoia. Robert Bloch's Psycho, made famous by Alfred Hitchcock's film adaptation, is a story of mental illness more than it is of monsters, although there are several grisly events there. Next please. Now coming to mystery. Unlike crime novels, mystery novels, they concern themselves less with the struggle between good and evil and more with the question of who committed a crime. While crime writers, they often reveal their villain early in the story. Mystery writers, they dedicate most of their narrative to cracking an unsolved case, and the villain is revealed almost at the very end of a book. Next please. There are 6 elements of any mystery novel. A crime, which is generally a murder or multiple murder. Then an unknown criminal, the villain is typically revealed in the end.
But these are a little different from what we now know as crime fiction. We have, these have a bit of digressions on morality, a bit of a huge cast of characters. Crime fiction now, as we know, it is very tightly written. There's not much of moralization, sermonization. Police procedurals are very, very focused to the point of precision on the actual detection of the crime. But in medieval England, we also had crime. There's a very famous personality in medieval England who went about with his band of maiden men in the forests of Sherwood, committing all sorts of crimes. These are the tales of Robin Hood. I'm sure we've all heard of it, we've seen the series. But were there murders? Yes, there were murders. Were there investigations? No, there were no investigations because everyone knew it was Robin Hood doing it. Can we call it crime fiction? Not really, perhaps. But there was another time, at the same time, when the Robin Hood stories began getting written about, circa 1377 or so, William Langland's poem, The Vision of Piers Plowman, was the first to mention the Robin Hood stories in medieval England. A couple of centuries later, we had something called the rogue pamphlet. Okay, this was writing which we would now call pulp fiction. It was meant to scandalize the genteel folk living in London about tales about how dissolute the rogues are in the streets of London, how they can murder you, cut your throat, come into your house, and do all sorts of wild things to you and your families. This was very, very popular in the Tudor and Stuart England. But later, we have Voltaire's Zadig, written in 1748, which is considered an earliest example of detective fiction. In around the 1860s, we had something called the sensation novel, which burst on the scene. This was influenced by the earlier Gothic writing, which was very popular, and something called the Newgate novel, which I spoke about, the rogue fiction, which was about the dissoluteness of London's rogues. There was something called the penny dreadful. These are little pamphlets printed on very cheap paper as soon as the printing press came out. Penny dreadful, they cost a penny. They had dreadful stories. That's how they call why they call the penny dreadfuls. What is considered the first ever actual predecessor of modern crime fiction is E.T.A. Hoffman's 1819 novella called Mademoiselle de Scuderi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, so please forgive me if I'm not. Also, Thomas Skinner Stur's Anonymous Richmond, Stories of Life of a Bow Street Officer. This was published in 1827. But this doesn't get so much credit as someone we all know and love, Edgar Allan Poe's See Auguste Dupin. This detective created by Edgar Allan Poe was the predecessor to another detective written by another man whom we all love and have all read, I can say that without any iota of a doubt, Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. So, with his Dupin stories, Poe provided the framework for the classic detective novel. And he also introduced in his stories an unnamed companion, who then in Conan Doyle's books became, who did he become? The unnamed narrator. He became a named narrator in Sherlock Holmes stories, who was also Sherlock Holmes' companion and guide. Dr. Watson, yes. Then there's Wilkie Collins' epistolary novel called The Woman in White, published in 1860, which is also a crime story, but his novel The Moonstone, which was published in 1868, is considered a masterpiece, of course, and it set into place something that became very popular later with a novelist that Dr. Poole said, thanks dear Agatha, to. He established the entire scenario of the English country house, the locked room, the cozy mystery, the murder, the crime. So this came about with Wilkie Collins' book, The Moonstone. So there's lots and lots of stuff, but I think we don't have that much time. While there were plenty of whodunits written by Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers, cozy mysteries set in English country houses, the amateur detective, the detectives created by the male fiction writers of that time, a little later, who then went into what is called hard-boiled detective fiction, or the noir fiction, as Dr. Poole mentioned. Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, Jonathan Latimer, Mickey Spillane, Earl Stanley Gardner, all of these authors we've read in our early days. Closer? Yeah. So we had the male private investigator, the hard-boiled detective. We had the military veteran. So this entire phase of noir and hard-boiled writing happened. Then we had the police procedural. What emerged with the Cold War era was the spy thriller. I'm sure every one of us has read the spy thrillers, and they were immensely popular at that point of time. Frederick Fawcett's Play of the Jackal was not a spy thriller, it was crime. The Spy Who Loved Me. There's so many spy thrillers that were out there. But the end of the Cold War led to the end of the spy thriller, and corporate America led to the emergence of the courtroom drama, of corporate drama. A lot of legal thrillers began coming out at this point of time. This was 1980s. We had Scott Turow, who was a lawyer himself, who gave up law to become a writer and wrote Presumed Innocent, which became a big hit. And of course, we've had all kinds of new genres emerging since then. More contemporary fiction has had psychological thrillers. I'm guilty of writing one of them too. So has read one of them, Missing, Presumed Dead. I've written the horror thriller as well, More Things in Heaven. I've written cozy mysteries, the Kitty Bati murder, which is there. So, jack of all trades. But right now what we're seeing is the domestic thriller. We've seen women writing thrillers which are very dark grim. We've seen Gone Girl. We've seen The Girl on the Train, Paula Hawkins' books. And the voice of these narrators is unreliable. It's a very different kind of voice from the, the very precise detective who was going about things methodically in our detective fiction. We've had Scandinavian Noir, which has become very popular in recent times. We've had Joe Nesbo, Stieg Larsson, who have written these very dark, chilling books and very gruesome and graphic books as well. Of course, in India, we've had detective fiction for the longest time. Everybody knows Satyajit Ray and Feluda series. We've had Sharadendra Bandyopadhyay with Vyomkesh Bakshi. Now we've had mythofiction with Ashwin Sanghi. We have Anita Nair writing a beautiful detective stories. Corporate crime, Ravi Subramanian writes, drawing from his experience as a banker. True crime, we have Hussain Zaidi, who does wonderful true crime. Vish Taneja also does corporate thrillers. What now? I know I was asked to talk about the history of crime thrillers, but what now? Where does the crime thriller go from here? Or has it already gone where it has to go? We have science fiction which is doing the work of crime thrillers. We have Altered Carbon, which talks about immortality and what depravity mankind can go to if they have immortality. We have the movie Blade Runner, Two Androids, People of Electric Sheep. What happens if you make cyborgs? What do they commit crimes? Crime fiction is going to uncharted territory now. I can't wait to see how devious the human mind can now get with artificial intelligence, with virtual reality, with cryptocurrency. I'm sure it will be an exciting time for all of us readers now. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Carrying the discussion further, I would like Dr. Neha to elaborate on the point that why crime, mystery and thriller novels continue to be so popular among the readers. Other than romance, I think crime is the really selling. Can you?
Yes. Thank you so much for the question. And among all the panelists here, I think I have the easiest question to answer, which is that crime fiction is so popular. We've heard all of our panelists, as Dr. Naqvi said, that crime fiction is something that grows on us since our childhood. Nobody who's a book nerd has not read a crime thriller, definitely. And then, as Dr. Kapoor mentioned, that this is a genre which has its subgenres and its own classification. No doubt it's so popular. And as Kiran said about the history, that this genre is taking place from centuries ago. And today we are still exploring new genres and new subplots. There is no doubt, and I read it somewhere which I found so resonating, that crime fiction can be considered like this Roman arch bridge. Each plot and subplot is like a brick in the bridge. If you take one brick out of the bridge, the whole bridge is going to come stalling down. And that really puts the reader into this gripping action, a gripping conversation with the novel, I should say. When I read the crime novels and when I think about the crime thrillers, I think it has a cause and an effect. A plot gives you certain kind of a drama that creates a cause. That cause creates an effect. And there is a panorama of these cause and effects. And I think this keeps the subliminal action, this kind of subliminal action keeps the readers very engaged and intact in the novel. Of course, all of us know about the crime fictions which involve who done it. I mean, when I read a novel, I want to know who did this. Until the end, it doesn't satisfy. You cannot put the book down until you know who did this. We, of course, want justice to be done and the crook to be, given its word. But then, the more irresistible ones are the stories which talk about why done it. That means we want to know the intention behind the person who did this crime. Or the detective who just solved this mystery. Now those are irresistible. And for me, as I have been reading crime fictions, but not so much, but howsoever I've read these crime fictions, I realize that they are tight, they are gripping, they are focused. So much so that sometimes you believe that these stories are happening in your next room. And I think that gives crime fiction the kind of popularity it rightly deserves, and rightly as the opening of this session. Thank you so much. Taking the discussion forward, I first congratulate both the authors sitting on our panel for writing wonderful books and for the benefit of the audience. I'll first ask Dr. Kapoor, your book, The Honeymoon, is a mystery, with scuba diving as its backdrop. So can you please tell us, how and where did this idea conceive?
First, I will say that this book belongs as much to me as to my wife and partner in crime, Dr. Neha Jain. She went to attend a conference in Caribbean islands, famous for water sports. Her colleague narrated to her several scuba incidents. Coming back, she shared these with me. The material was perfect for a mystery. So then I sat down and I developed the story arc, then the characters, their journey, their their motives, and finally the rationale behind their actions. We went to Maldives and stayed in an overwater villa. So the sea, the beaches, the buildings all became a part of this book. So this was how the book actually was conceived, and then it went into writing and then got published.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kapoor. Now, one more question. As you presented to all of us the different classifications, the genres and sub-genres of crime fiction, so where do you place The Honeymoon?
This, as I mentioned, this is basically a scientific mystery, because medical forensics have been used in catching the culprit. The case gets solved only when the final postmortem report comes. And further than this, I can't tell you, because then that really reveals the plot. But yes, other than that, there's social drama, there's family problems, all add up, love triangle. All the parts are there which have been tied together, and finally the case gets cracked when the PM findings are revealed.
Thank you so much. Now
I will ask you, Kiran Manral ji, tell us about your book, More Things in Heaven and Earth.
So, More Things in Heaven and Earth is a paranormal thriller. There is a crime, there's a death. So that's a book which has we don't know whether it's a murder or it's a natural death, so I can't give that away. And the book is basically about grief and loss and widowhood and dealing with it. It's quite an emotional book. It's centers around a woman who is widowed at a very young age and how she's dealing with the sudden unexpected death of her husband. But having said that, there is also behind us the Kitty Party murder, which is a cozy mystery. It's about a woman who lives in a gated community, and there is a sudden death in a kitty party group, and of course this is a comic mystery, so she has to get to the heart of it because she's a very nosy person, and that means infiltrating a kitty group. So these are two very different kinds of books that I've written. One is very dark and noir, and this is a very light and comic one.
Okay, if you permit me a slight deviation from the questionnaire. Tell us something about your other book, Missing Presumed Dead.
That's the one you've read, sir, right? So that's a thriller. I wouldn't call it a thriller. It's a noir book. It's psychological. It's about a woman who has mental health issues, a marriage which is dysfunctional. I have tried in that book to explore both the disintegration of a marriage. I think Smita's right here. We discussed Missing Presumed Dead the last time we were here. The disintegration of a marriage when coupled with a woman's mental health issues and how it affects not just her but the entire family, and why we need to prioritize mental health. It's a book that has multiple layers to it, and I haven't tried to preach in this book. I've just told the story as it is of what happens.
Incidentally, the law waits for 7 years for a missing person to be recovered before being pronounced dead. Next, I will address my question to both of you, Dr. Kapoor and Kiran Manral. What are the processes you follow when you sit for writing a book?
That's difficult to answer because with each book it's a different process, but I can divide it into two basic. First, sometimes first I get an idea which gives me an opening. Then I develop the narrative forwards and finally the climax. At other times, I get an idea which gives me the ending, and then I develop the narrative forwards and finally the opening. So it's both ways. Sometimes I begin with the opening and sometimes with the ending. If you ask my opinion, I find the second type of writing more impactful and easier also, because when you know the ending, most of the books, if you have a strong and unexpected ending, that has a more impactful thing on the readers. Because no one really reads a book for its opening or its middle. It's the end that actually matters, how you end your book. So this is the basic process. Either beginning, sometimes it is with the opening idea or sometimes with the end. But I also focus on not using really difficult words, because I don't want to discombobulate my readers, confuse my readers by using fancy stuff like denizens instead of citizens or puissant instead of powerful. So I write the way I speak, which is what I have learned through various people who are into writing. They always advised me when I was beginning as my writing journey, that use the language you actually use in your day-to-day conversations. That will connect with the reader more. This is the basic process which I follow while writing.
Thank you. You, please.
So that's a very difficult question, sir, because we have two kinds of writers. We have plotters and we have pantsters. Now, what are plotters and what are pantsters? Plotters are the ones who will plot every single thing from, the character graph, the opening scene right to the end, and when they write, it is a fill in the blanks kind of a situation. And some novels, of course, you have to be plotters because they're detective fiction or crime fiction. You can't let the plot run away everywhere and then sit down redoing it. And then there are the panisters who start writing with an idea or a character and then develop the plot as it goes along. How do I write? I write both ways, to be honest. There are some novels which I have plotted, and there are some novels which I have no clue what the characters were going to do, how they were going to turn out, and they surprised me. So the ones that I have plotted have been very convenient to write because there's no going back and forth and agonizing, and you know what the end is. As Dr. Kapoor said, the end is very important, and that's something I believe as well. But having said that, being a panister is creatively much more satisfying. When I take the germ of a character, when a character comes to me like Julia McNally in The Face at the Window, or Aisha Thakur in Missing Presumed Dead, or Kamla Malik in More Things in Heaven and Earth, these are books that were not plotted. These are books that started with the character. And these are books where the character took me on the journey of their own, and they did things that I never ever imagined that they would do. And it is not very time efficient, let me tell you. So I don't recommend it.
Beautifully explained. You have to go for another round. Dr. Kapoor first. What are the essentials of a good crime fiction?
Crime fiction, the logic and analytics, they are very important to this genre. The situations should be plausible, not implausible. Then the narrative should have, as we have been talking, should have twists and turns. The story cannot, the things should actually get complicated with each clue. Other than that, a good crime novel should also, the cover-ups are very important, what we call red herrings. The culprit tries to throw the investigative agencies off balance. He wants to confuse them. And another important thing is motive. That's the crux. If there has to be a very strong motive for committing a crime. This I think Dr. Naqvi will agree, because if there is no motive, how will you catch the culprit? How will you catch the murderer or whatever? So motive is again of utmost importance, and that should be a very strong and logical. Yes, he has done it because this was what he had, this problem or this anguish. Other than that, the suspense naturally should be maintained till the very end. And I personally like those books and those serials and everything where everything is neatly tied up at the end. There should be no loose ends. You are confused why this person has been acting like this, or probably these days the trend of seasons has come. That is why several things are left unexplained. But that leaves the reader or the viewer dissatisfied. So all the things preferably should be tied up by the time the book ends.
From my professional experience, I can tell you that there are sometimes crimes without motives also. Anyway, thank you for elaborating on that.
So are you able to catch them?
Yes, definitely. And they only say that they have no motive. The same question goes for you, Kiran Manral ji. What do you think are the essentials of good crime fiction?
So, I think the main thing about good crime fiction is pace. If the book is such that you can't put it down, and the pace is metered out so well by the author that you keep going to one cliffhanger after another, then that's good crime fiction. Of course, there's motive, as Dr. Kapoor said. Sometimes you don't have motives. You have Hannibal Lecter who ate a census taker's liver with fava beans because he just felt like it. So there's no motive to that, but it was a crime. So, or there's a talented Mr. Ripley who just doesn't have an actual motive, but just wants to climb up the social ladder. So there's no vengeance or anything. He's just psychopathically criminal. So there's also that. there's character which is important, there's space which is important, there's atmosphere, how you build your atmosphere. It depends completely on the subgenre. If it's a police procedural, your forensics have to be in place and perfect. Tomorrow, nobody. Or if it's a legal thriller, you have to know your law of the place in which your plot is set. I think all these little things add up. And of course, there are the little tropes. You have Chekhov's axe. For instance, if you bring something in at the start of a show, if you have an axe on the wall, that axe in the scene 1, then that axe has to come in place somewhere at the end of the story, so that the reader knows that the axe was not placed in vain. So all these things have to fall into place beautifully for a good crime thriller.
Thank you so much. Now, as a reader, since I get a chance to ask the authors right from the horse's mouth that how is the process of writing these crime fictions? So I want to ask to both of you all that, I mean, are your books plot-driven or character-driven? I mean, that's a difficult question, but please solve it for us. Solve this mystery for us. Dr. Kapoor, you can go first.
I'll keep this answer brief because, see, ideally it should be a mix of both. The plot is also important, and characters are also to be, people should be able to identify with them. But of late I have realized that it is the characters which really remain with the readers. See that most of you must have watched Money Heist. So I remember the professor, I remember Tokyo, Nairobi, Berlin, Denver, Arturo, but the plot has already started to become fuzzy. I have started forgetting the details. But the traits and how the professor walked, how Nairobi would react to this situation, or what was that made Tokyo so reckless in such some things. So characters, I think, are more important or better remembered, but basic plot should always be right.
Right. And what about you, Kiran? Is it plot or character which takes the lead?
I gave a long answer to that earlier. But yeah, it depends completely on the kind of book. So if you're writing literary fiction, it's character. If you're writing a thriller, it has to be plot and pace. So it completely depends on your writing style and the kind of book you're writing and how you take it forward.
I'll take another question in this continuation. That what are your thoughts and how do you explore female protagonists in a crime fiction? I mean, that you do beautifully with your books, and how do you do that?
Thank you so much. I think there was something I read about how Philip Marlowe's detectives would be, if you think of Humphrey Bogart in these times, he would be very ill-placed in a Gone Girl or in a Girl on the Train, the Woman on the Train. Because these are very internal books. These are books which dwell from the mind of the character, and female protagonists give you more scope because they internalize things. A female writer, I wouldn't like to say writer because Agatha Christie has written the female detective as brilliantly as she's written the male detective. But I think it's more internal, it's more about how you feel than what you see and how you commit the crime. It is the entire sensation of why and how you are experiencing it rather than what is happening before you. So that's the primary difference, I think.
Thank you so much for this answer. Now to Dr. Kapoor, my question to you would be, I mean, we know this is a unique scuba mystery that you've written, a murder mystery. What are you planning to write next? Is there a book in pipeline?
It was out of pipeline, but not delivered to the publisher. It's titled She. There are 4 murders. Because Abhilash told me, why have you just restricted yourself to 1 murder in the honeymoon? So I went overboard. I said this time I'll manage with 4. So there are 4 murders.
No, don't be responsible for that murder.
So there are 4 murders, but the modus operandi is the same. It involves a beautiful woman, split radial arteries, and 6 alphabets A, B, E, R, S, U soaked in victim's blood. What do they mean? The police is not able to find her because she doesn't exist. It's a saga gripping with love, lust, abuse, suspense, intrigue, and friendship. So this will come out in another 6 months.
Wonderful. And ladies and gentlemen, with your permission, if you allow me, I would like to open the round for the audience as well.
Yeah, before that, I had one question with my discussants each.
Sure, sir.
First, Dr. Naqvi, said we have a murder somewhere today. So how the police actually proceeds? We keep writing fiction and all that, but you are actually doing it.
Fine. Let me explain in very brief and something which everybody will be able to relate to. There has to be information received by the police, whoever informs. And this is registered as an unnatural death case. CRPC provisions 174 to 176 describes in detail how do you go about that. So once you have an unnatural death information, you visit this spot, you issue subpoena or summons for witnesses. In presence of witness, you examine the place, the body, conduct a panchanama. Then after that, you can call your forensics team to the spot, the photos, videos and everything. And then afterwards, you have those 5 witnesses, and after the panchanama is drawn, you send the body to postmortem, mortuary. Postmortem is basically done for finding out the cause of death, time since death and mode of death. So it gives you an impression whether the death was a natural death, was a homicidal death, a suicidal death, or in between, whatever. So once you receive the postmortem report, and based on that, if a crime is made out with other corroborative evidences, you register a crime of section 302 IPC, and this investigation then starts again in the CRPC provisions 154 till 173. It involves all these steps. In between, the more important step is the scientific evidence collection, because the whole investigation is a process of collection of evidence so that it can be brought before the competent magistrate court to be prosecuted or discharged as is the case. I hope this suffices.
Thank you, Dr. Naqvi. It was very comprehensive as well as very well explained in simple words. Because most of us do, and people read crime novels, but the actual procedures are still not very clear to us. I would like to ask Dr. Neha, see, in general fiction, strong word choices and literary devices, they play an important role in making the narrative more impactful and thrilling. But what do you feel? Do crime writing also, does it need literary devices and strong word choices?
Just for the benefit, I should say first, before I comment any crime here, for the novel purists, I'm an IS officer, not a novelist, so I can answer it from a perspective of a keen reader. So I think, words are armory for an author. Of course, they should have meaning, they should have a context. You cannot use a Tharur English for a young adult, and neither you can use a word like a wonky in a legal thriller. I mean, that takes away from the context, the soul of the book that you're writing and the reader is reading. As you said, words are as important for any novel, a piece of prose or poetry as for a crime fiction. But I feel for crime fiction, it's even more important because for a crime fiction, it seems as if the picturization, the humanism that the words, woven words actually interplay, they appear as if they're happening in the next room. And I think that really sums up the importance of words which need to be of course important, and economical at the same time. So this is a very brief understanding of what I have for the words. Thank you.
Continuing with your questioning, who are your favorite crime authors, crime writers?
Okay, I mean, for me, a lot of my childhood was with Agatha Christie. I mean, that's how I think young book nerds are. We feel as if, the author is speaking to us. And that's how you feel important, by the way, just looking at the book itself. And so I used to find the books really, really interesting, like any other crime, lover. After that, I think among the Indian authors, it's not that discussed, but I think I really enjoyed The Calcutta Chromosome by Amitabh Ghosh, which is a beautiful thriller. And then, of course, all of us would have seen The Sacred Games, but when I actually wanted to read it, it's a humongous book to read. But it's at the same time, you cannot put it down. And I think that is the beauty of crime thrillers, that howsoever big, huge they are, you cannot put them down. That's for me.
Three of your favorite crime writers that you have?
See, it has been changing as I was growing. So, very long back, I liked the novel Day of the Jackal, that is Frederick Forsyth. Then I moved on to Robert Ludlum, and I really very much like this series made as films, Born Identity, and I have been reading a lot of Alistair MacLean and Chase also, Hadley Chase also. And in Hindi also I have been reading some Pathak and then Urdu, as you said, Ibn Safi and all those. So it keeps on changing.
There's one Colonel Ranjit also.
Yeah, Colonel Ranjit also long.
Okay, so that was an intensifying discussion. The round is open for the audience. If you have some questions here, a man right there, please get the microphone.
I don't need mic. I can talk.
Please go ahead.
Okay, right. May I have liberty to talk to Dr. Kapoor that can I give you a topic that being a medical person, it will be easy for you to write on the corona, because a lot of gunjal has taken place in the various hospitals, which is in-house things you can write better. You know what?
Actually, fiction, Byron and all those books and even films which actually depict the corona scenario very closely have already been made. But yes, this is a good idea.
That is a Wuhan theory and all those rat theory and all various theories has come up in the
this could be an interesting take on the pandemic.
Thank you.
Second question.
मेरा सवाल डॉक्टर कपूर के लिए है कि आप इतनी इंस्पायरिंग पेरेंटिंग की किताब लिखते लिखते मर्डर मिस्ट्री तक कैसे पहुंचे, इसकी मिस्ट्री सॉल्व करवाइए।
भैया बच्चे बड़े हो गए। वो they won't take tips from me now. I take tips from them. So
ये मर्डर मिस्ट्री का इंस्पिरेशन भी बच्चों ने ही दिया है आपको लिखने के लिए।
ये तो पार्टनर इन क्राइम ने दिया है।
I guess any more questions? Last, yes. Please bring the mic to lady here.
I wanted to ask the question from Kiran, because I've read your books, but also anybody else. How important is humor in crime fiction? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, humor is important in every book. But and do you think about it consciously, or does it just seep in because it's part of your character?
So, Shinjini, you've read Reluctant Detective and you've read The Kitty Party Murder. I don't know if you've read the darker books. They're completely different voices. So, humor does come in those two books because my character, K. Mehra, is a regular, everyday schoolgate mom, and I can't put her in very dark situations. The whole scenario of her gated suburban complex and all the shenanigans that go with it makes for a very humorous situation. And having said that, I have enjoyed reading humorous detective fiction. There was something called Dangerous Davies. I don't know if anyone has read it. there were just 3 books with a detective called Dangerous Davies. And I have never laughed so hard in my life while he was finding dead bodies and cleaning out canals and getting murders. So I think that sort of stayed with me, that you can write funny and you can write dead bodies at the same time. And of course you have Alexander McCall Smith, who's written beautifully. So I think these are the inspirations I draw from.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, Pradeep ji, Kiran ji, Naqvi ji and Neha ji for that intensifying discussion. And now I would like to invite one of the founding members of the Society for Culture and Environment, Mr. Vilash Khandekar ji, to felicitate the authors and the discussants here. And और मैं चाहूँगा हम सब तालियों के साथ जी हाँ a painting, a beautiful painting based on the tribal art created by Padma Shri Gauri Bai ji. A beautiful painting as a token of love, respect and gratitude from the Bal Literature and Art Festival to our authors, Dr. Pradeep Kapoor ji and Kiran Manral ji. Murder mystery titled as The Honeymoon. And here are the mugs for our wonderful discussants for the session. Naqvi Sahab and Neha ji. जी हाँ, तालियां बरकरार होनी चाहिए, जोरदार होनी चाहिए. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for that wonderful discussion. Thank you so much.